It's time to spread the word to friends, family, and the universe. 24 hours of music and talk. Radio without limits. That's why people keep coming back for more. That's UBNradio.com.
Welcome to Both Sides Now, featuring the unconventional duo, Dr. Shirley and medium Kellee White. Two perspectives, one world. This is Both Sides Now.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Both Sides Now. I'm Dr. Shirley.
And I'm medium Kellee White.
And today we have a really special guest. Her name is Tammi Stefano, and she is a huge child advocate, so she holds a very special place in my heart.
Thank you.
Welcome, Tammi.
Welcome.
Thank you, ladies. I feel so honored to be here today with you. It's I've been waiting and just hoping that you both would be asking me to be a guest, because I know you're fabulous ladies and you have so much to bring to the people, and so I'm just grateful to be here.
Well, we're so happy that you're here. I mean, being a child advocate, you know, I've worked in that field too, and we'll get into it in the show, but I'm just so glad that you're doing what you're doing. And first of all, I want to announce your show on UBN Radio.
Absolutely.
It's the National Safe Child Show. It's on Channel 2 at 7 p.m. on Sundays, right?
That's correct.
Okay,
Thank
wonderful. So, I don't know, why don't you, did you have...
Yeah, how did you get started in this? And before we even go there, I just want to say, really, there's a special place in heaven for you for doing this work.
I hope
Truly.
so.
Oh,
Yeah.
please.
I hope so.
Listen, if she's telling you, there is.
Please.
Thank you.
I think you do
That
incredible
feels great.
work. My
Yeah.
goodness. What got you interested in this? Because it's such a special thing.
It is.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we can talk about, for
Sure.
the listeners who
So
don't
the
know.
National Safe Child Coalition is an organization that really addresses the systemic failures that are happening in this country, almost in every state. I mean,
With protecting kids.
with protecting
Yeah.
children, with child safety, with there are entities that are established specifically to protect children, and yet what we have found is more children are harmed and die within those very entities that remove children from parents that they allege are abusive.
Yeah.
And so when we started to see that, we just thought, wow, something has to happen. These children have no voices. They're considered property, really, in the U.S. They're not really allowed to speak in a courtroom, to voice what's happening to them. And so we rely on professionals, many of which are not necessarily honest. And that's one of the issues that we address as well. Or trained properly, absolutely. And so they have no skill to understand if a child is being abused. And, you know, myself being a survivor of abuse when I was younger by strangers, not parental abuse or familial abuse, but it's so hard to discuss with an adult or with anybody what has happened with you. Yeah. And just imagine a child being questioned a dozen times, 24 times by different entities and almost to the point of interrogation. Yeah. What happens? They close up. And so then we have people that say, well, they have retracted. No, they haven't retracted. It's exactly what you said, Dr. Shirley. If the initial interviewer came and properly had the training to properly interview these children, they would get an answer and they would get a story that would be accurate. And then they could take it from there. If you start off wrong, the child then closes up and goes under that shell like a turtle, sometimes never to come out again until they're well into their adulthood.
Yeah. It's just, you know, I'm so glad that you're one of the voices for the kids. There's so many animal protection, which is wonderful too, because they don't have a voice either.
That's right.
But kids, I think it's just so, you know, it doesn't make sense in our brain. We can't quite put the two together that, you know, kids are being abused or that someone would do such horrendous things to kids, that we almost kind of just want to
Block it
forget
out.
about it, block it out, and
Yeah.
not think about it.
Well, and
You know?
also you're thinking that, if they're in protective services, that they will be, in
Protected.
fact, protected.
Yeah,
It
you would
sounds like that's
think,
not
but it's not.
necessarily what's happening.
I worked it for 10 years. I worked for the Department of Children's Services for 10 years, so I know, what goes on in there. But I don't, before we get into that, I really want to talk about, so your experience, as a kid, I would think kind of got you to become this.
Molded the
incredible
life that I'm.
advocate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Wow, and having gone through it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right.
Well, because what happens is on the other side, before we incarnate, we choose what is it that we want to accomplish in this lifetime. And in your case, I believe that you said, all right, I'm going to help with children. I'm going to protect those kids. And so you may have had to choose a particular situation that occurred to you in order for you to have the real experience. Because I find that in life, if you don't have the experience, you don't necessarily have that kind of passion and drive. There's something about that apparently you clearly have.
Wow, that's amazing that you say that, because I really believe that. I believe it, Unfortunately, we don't want to go through suffering, but
No.
it is the suffering that brings us to that level of passion to do whatever it is that we're doing.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, one of the gifts of pain is wisdom.
Yeah.
Yes. most
Absolutely.
definitely.
Absolutely. And strength. I mean, and perseverance and endurance, and we're
bet.
not fearful of it because we've already experienced it, and we can really face it, head on. And a lot of people say, gosh, why aren't you afraid? I'm not afraid. My conscience is clear. When it's my time, it's my time. But until then, we can't fight things halfway and expect victory. So, wow, I think that's great that you just brought that up, Kellee. I often think about that, and not in the same direct way that you just did, but I address parents in the same sort of way where, this experience, albeit so painful for you and your children, will bring you to a place that you not only are ultra aware of what's happening around you, but it will bring you together ultimately.
Ultimately, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think realizing how our experiences kind of inform who we become and what we choose to do, I think can be really part of the healing process
I agree.
as well.
I agree.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great, ladies. I never quite heard it like that, but
Yeah, well, good for you. So tell me some of the things that you do. How are you a child advocate? What do you do? Are you in there with the trenches? What?
oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. I'm right in the muck of it all. We do everything from parents contact us because they're, and just to be clear, it isn't only Child Protective Services that we see systemic failures within. It's also the family court system.
Oh yeah.
When it comes to divorces and, who's going to get the child. And sometimes it's, lots of times when the parent actually contacts us, it's because the child has disclosed more so sexual abuse by one of the parents. The safe parent has disclosed to the court, thinking that that's the proper platform to disclose and hopeful and expecting to receive protection for the child. And what they actually get is they get a failed court system that just doesn't recognize in exactly the reasons that you just said, Dr. Shirley, because they're not trained properly.
Yeah.
And so the child inevitably and unfortunately gets put with the abuser. And so is forced to live in this protective parent who will fight until, like a mama bear, until her skin is ripped apart, or his skin in some cases,
Yeah.
and they just keep fighting. And what does that do? It keeps the court systems very busy,
Yeah.
and they are funded. So
Well, it's we also, I think, have to realize that everyone who's in those jobs, even the jobs of authority like the judges, are humans.
that's right.
I had a case when I was working where this child, she was 2 and she had herpes, vaginal herpes.
Vaginal.
And she couldn't speak.
That's right.
So, and she was with mother's boyfriend because mother was a drug addict and out and about somewhere. And the judge had placed her with mother's boyfriend and nobody understood why. So I decide, we take, this was actually initiated in the ER, right?
Right.
So I get there and I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to do? She's she can't talk to me. And so I thought, okay, so I told the boyfriend, I need you to have your penis checked by the doctor. And if you don't have herpes, if you don't have warts, then you can take her home and because it was an open case, obviously.
Right.
But if you do, then, And so he went ahead and did it. And of course, he had warts. And so I detained the kid. 3 days later, the doctor's there, in court, because they called us into court. I'm there. The daytime social, the on-case social worker was there. And the judge admonished me for violating his rights to having his penis checked by the doctor.
Absolutely.
And she replaced the child back to the boyfriend.
Absolutely.
And then I hear from
Yes.
I think the ongoing social worker that the judge had fallen in love with his boyfriend because I guess, the case was ongoing and she had had a lot of contact with him. So, what do you do with that?
That's right. And this is what we're dealing with on a daily basis, actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's literally that bad. I mean, I've had the same thing. I've had 4-year-olds with STDs, gonorrhea.
Yeah.
And 4-year-olds can talk unlike the 2-year-old, and they are pointing to the abuser. And the abuser is given full custody. And if you get involved and if you try to interfere in this court order, there's been moms that have put in jail.
Yeah. Oh, forget it. Because the judge has the last thing. And actually, the
Yes.
judge said to me, you don't know. Because mom is whereabouts unknown, mom could have had herpes and the child could have gotten it when she passed the birth canal.
Right.
And that's what her explanation was.
That's absolutely right. And
And I
that's what they say. It's the
I
most
couldn't believe
bogus.
it.
It's the most bogus excuses I've ever heard in my life, and they fly. The evidence code, folks, might as well just be thrown out of the window because in family court and in dependency, a little bit more in dependency, it holds, but in family court, it doesn't hold at all.
Yeah.
And ironically, family court, there's no confidentiality, but in dependency court, Dr. Shirley, as you know, everything is behind closed doors.
Yeah.
Everything. So whatever happens to this kid, and then if you break that, you are violating welfare and institution code,
Right.
and you can be charged criminally with a misdemeanor.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
and I get that they're there to try and protect the child in the first place, but when you have people who, as we've talked, aren't fully trained or have huge biases, and for whatever reason they make it to that level to be decision makers,
That's right.
then something else needs to be put in place.
That's right. We're actually working on a panel right now because I think that it's the only way that we'll actually be able to make a difference. And so we will soon be setting up an 800 number. And we want to encourage everybody who has a visit from Child Protective Services. We will be disseminating this 800 number. It'll be available to everybody in the U.S. And they need to call this 800 number at the very, very onset of getting that visit so that they don't go down the rabbit hole because unfortunately parents make so many mistakes. They're almost like the fatal mistake is what we call them. And once they start signing paperwork, I mean, I go under, covertly sometimes and
Undercover.
Undercover, if you will. And I mean, I recorded a social worker saying, well, I said, well, this mom won't be signing anything. And she said, well, this is just to say that I was here and that I, spoke English to her and she understood. And I said, yeah, she won't be signing. And I have the social worker on audio saying, yeah, you're much too savvy for that, aren't you?
Really?
Yeah. I'm actually I'm gonna put this audio. I've been thinking about. I heard it again today. I said I have to put this on my show, really to show people I'm not exaggerating. This is real. They know what time of day it is, and that isn't to say that all social workers are bad.
Yeah.
Because there are some great ones that are even still working for the department that truly care about children.
Yeah.
They will never get the cases of the parents that call me because their cases turn out right, or the parents are responsible and they're either doing their program or they don't deserve to have the children.
Exactly.
And those parents exist as well. And I'm not going against the department for those. I'm very grateful that there's something set up. It's the multitude of cases that they get wrong, that they take good parents and rip their lives apart and separate children. And what does that do, Dr. Shirley? I mean, I always want to talk to you and say, from a psychological standpoint, I mean, I had an attorney on my show a couple of months ago that said 1 day apart from their parent in a stranger's house traumatizes them for God only knows how long.
Yeah.
Oh, forever.
Forever.
Unless they work.
Forever,
And if it's
actually.
an infant who has those memories stored in the implicit memory, which is, we'll call it the unconscious memory,
Yeah.
right? Because they don't have the words for it, then that can affect them their whole life and they may not even know it,
That's
as
right.
adults. Because it will absolutely affect them. It breaks that attachment, and the kid can go into like a deep, deep depression because they'll cry and that person isn't there.
Right.
That attachment bond is so
trust.
strong. Absolutely.
I mean, that's what we
Absolutely.
see. And, I look at all these kids that are they're shooting up schools, they're killing people, they're interested in guns and violence and rape. I mean, I don't remember this, and I'm not young, ladies. When I was growing up, if we heard about these cases, it was like national news because they just didn't happen on a daily basis.
Yeah.
They do now.
Yeah, they do. And what pisses me off is that people want to look at the behavior and they don't look at what's underneath the behavior. What would possess a kid to be interested in guns?
That's right.
Well, there's obvious anger there.
That's right.
Why is the child angry? Let's look at that. Not just, no, don't play with guns or take all guns away. Well, the
Right.
kid's going to find another way.
That's right.
They don't look at what's underneath the behavior, and there's a reason for that. And that's what really upsets me. Even the most, the last one that took place in Oregon. I mean, it's a tragedy. And of course, I feel for the parents and everyone who lost, and the people who lost their lives. But there's something with this kid who eventually got killed as well.
That's right.
He wasn't born that way. There was something going on.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's what we say, when parents call me and they break down and I can hear their anguish. And I'll ask them, so tell me about your parents. How was your life? Just to kind of bring them down. Not that I'm a therapist, but you kind of go into that role,
Right.
that
Sure,
quasi-therapist kind of role because, it comes with the territory. And they will say, yes, did your husband ever say that he was abused? Yes, he was sexually abused. Well, how about his parents? Do you know them well? His father, abused, or his mom abused. And all of a sudden you see this generational cycle
Yeah.
that as far back as they can go, that they have knowledge of, somebody was abused, and here we are. Nobody ever addressed it. They punished it. They never healed it.
Exactly. That's a huge difference. I love the way you say that. We punish things, but we don't heal it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it continues on. Like any kid who gets punished, well, you're going to be obedient for the time that you have to, but as soon as you're set free, as soon as nobody's looking, you're going right back because you haven't healed.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh,
It's
yeah. I mean,
so sad.
I see it so often with the adults that I see that I'm sure you see too, Kellee. Well, a guy will come in with, fantasies of really rough sex with women.
Yeah.
Well, that's, in my mind, I'm curious about how's your relationship with your mother.
That's right.
That's, hostility or even murderous rage against a parent maybe who wasn't there. And so you heal that.
That's
and then
right.
all of a sudden, that fantasy starts to decrease, and maybe they get into something else, and something else sexual becomes a fantasy, and not that anymore.
That's
But
right.
it's about exploring and being curious about things, and not vilifying the behavior in and of itself. Certainly, we want to decrease a behavior that's hurting other people and hurting themselves, of course.
Absolutely.
But it's taking it many more steps further, not just that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It's we don't have a lot of professionals that really understand that. And those, I shouldn't say that. The professionals that are dealing with these cases, really, most of them don't understand that. We have many professionals that do understand that, and I don't think that they would really be involved in these cases because their job and their goal is to help people. And it seems to me, from the cases, the hundreds that I've seen, it's not Child Protective Services' job to reach that goal.
Yeah.
And that's the sad part.
What is their goal then?
Their goal is to reach a quota, in my opinion, that allows them to then reach a next tier, if you will, that allows them to get more federal funding from you and I, the taxpayers, because that's what it's about. Because at the end of the year, they're going to take the number of children that they had in their system, that they treated, that they put in a group home, a foster home, adopted out. And based on that number, that makes that number constitutes how much federal funding you get for the next year. In the state of Louisiana, we actually have, and we haven't exposed it yet, but I'll expose it now on your show because we're ready to. We actually have Child Protective Services paperwork, official documents, and we have Child Protective Services other books, if you will. And it's two different numbers.
Wow.
Numbers that they give for their funding and numbers that they give to their state.
Wow.
Two different numbers that they did.
But see, that I think is criminal. It
It
should
is
never
criminal.
be based on how many kids you service. It should be a number, and if you don't use it in servicing all kids because you didn't have to, then you use it for something else, for
That's
other
right.
programs. But it should never be based on that because then, of course, the motivation is
It's
going to be
incentive.
the quota.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That's what we
Absolutely. I
say.
didn't even know that. That
Yes.
is ridiculous.
This is a financially incentivized program. That's why we say
That's
take away
criminal.
the federal funding. All of a sudden, parents really are not that bad. And the ones that are, there'll be enough money to be able to address them. And, you know, we're looking at how about instead of taking children away from parents that, listen, nobody is perfect, but parents that have a mind and a heart to do it right, but maybe they weren't taught. Maybe they don't know how. Maybe they have a lot of stressors in their lives, but they still love their kids, but they can't handle it. How about getting them some help?
Right. Right.
How
How about putting
about-
money in those programs?
Yes,
Right.
because those
right.
programs will make our communities better.
Absolutely.
They'll bring people to a better understanding, a higher education,
Yeah.
more compassion.
And maybe we won't have then kids, young adults who go into a college and shoot. You know, if
That's
the
right.
parents had had help to parent this child maybe a little differently, not that I'm saying that it's the parents' fault, but to
Right.
have the education. I mean, I made mistakes with my own child.
too.
You know,
Lots
so,
of 'em.
So it's about having the information.
Right.
You know, it's so true. It's so true.
And, you know, children, and then, you know, then the question comes, where do children go once they're in the system?
Oh,
That's a really good question. Can you
Yeah.
walk us through that?
Well, I'll do my very best because we're still looking for the missing children that never
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
you know, are reported as missing because they're not really obligated to report missing children. So we have child trafficking. We have to think about that.
Oh my
As a matter of fact, there was just a case not long ago where a social worker was selling names. She got convicted.
Are you
2 weeks
kidding
ago.
me? In LA?
No, not in
Oh,
LA.
Okay.
But it doesn't matter. Listen.
Oh no, of course it
in
doesn't matter.
another
I was just
state-
curious because I worked it for 10 years, and so I
Absolutely.
wanted
You'd like to know the name.
Right.
Who did it?
Who did
You
it?
probably have a lot of people that you think might have done it.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, and I'll tell you, she was supposed to do time, but what happened? The judge, her counsel argued, you know, she's going to school, she's getting her master's degree, Your Honor.
If you
You were
have
selling names of children.
if you have the tendency to do that, I don't give two shits if you've got 5 PhDs and 2 MD degrees.
That's right.
That's in your nature
That's
to do that.
right. The
Oh,
easy
that's
way, and who cares
awful.
about the kid? I don't know him. But guess
Wow.
what? These child traffickers, I mean, I can't encourage people enough. I know that child trafficking is in so many other countries. We need to really take a look here in our own country, in the U.S., the civilized nation that we live in,
Yeah.
because it is hundreds of thousands of children that are being trafficked and sold in our own country. and
my
now we're
gosh.
becoming privy to our child protective services are part of the components of the sales.
Wow.
And that's
Wow.
that's the real deal.
That is, oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
it's bad.
Well, on that very depressing note, we're going to need to take a break, and then we will come back and continue to talk about this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
2, 1, and we are live.
So welcome back to Both Sides Now. Sorry we had a little technical difficulty, and it's not your imagination. We're in a different room, so the background looks different. So don't think that, oh my God, what happened? I'm seeing things. We had a little technical difficulty in the other studio, so we've moved to Studio 2. And let's continue where we left off in that cliffhanger of child trafficking was just, I mean, hurts my heart. How
awful.
prevalent is it in the United States?
It is quite prevalent, and unfortunately, we can't really access the real numbers, and we can only guesstimate. But what we do know is that Child Protective Services does not have to report a child missing.
Why?
Your guess is as good as mine. It's a confidential situation. I mean, there was a report that came out in 2013 by County Council,
Yeah.
a leak, and it showed 570 children had died in the system within an 18-month period
Are you kidding me?
just in Los Angeles County.
Oh,
These children were never reported to be dead.
it makes me so angry.
Never reported. Nobody knew.
Wow.
So your child gets taken away, and you hope and pray that they are being taken care of, that they're with good people at the very least, only to find out that your child's name is in a report that got leaked because somebody internally just couldn't stand it anymore. That's what we're dealing
Oh
with.
my God. I mean, it's just the system is just so broken, and you would think that it's a system to help kids. You know, how can it be so broken? You know, I mean,
Money.
I want, well, and that's
I mean, it really just feels sinister, the whole thing to me.
And
Just a real dark energy about it. I mean, here, you know, you've got such light workers that are coming in to want to infuse light, which is what you do. You're a light worker. You're trying to
Right.
bring light. You're trying to make public what is going on and hope that people will do something about it. You know, but it's sinister. It's a
It's
low
so-
energy, you know, evil, low energy vibration.
Yes.
it's, yeah, I mean, it just baffles my mind. You know, I mean, in all fairness, you know, because I worked for the department for 10 years, you know, you're given, even if you spend a whole day with the family, but you're given, let's just say 24 hours to make a life-altering decision in someone's family,
Right.
you know? And I don't think that anyone is trained enough to understand. I wasn't at the time. I've learned it, you know, about attachment. And we
Right.
talked about it a little earlier, about how important that attachment is to a child and how it can affect his or her life forever.
That's right.
So we don't know the importance of that attachment bond. And so when in doubt, maybe you err on the side of conservatism and take the child away so the child doesn't get, you know, because you already walk in with a bias. You know, you get a call.
Yes.
You know, I used to work nights, so you get a call,
gosh.
you know, straight off the hotline.
Yes.
And you go to the house and you're already walking in with a bias because you are.
Yes.
You know,
of
I
course.
can't say you're not.
Of course. Somebody
right?
called, you've seen some ugliness. That ugliness sears your mind. I mean, it's staying with you. And so the next call that you go on, I could only imagine you're expecting the worst.
Yeah, you know, and the call in and of itself kind of puts you in that bias. You know,
Sure.
unfortunately, there's a lot of people who, you know, so sickly use the system to get back at each other. Like we used to get a lot of divorce cases where they used to,
Oh,
you know,
I've
get
had
upset
that.
at the other
Yes.
parent and do that. So there's a lot of those kind of cases too.
That's right.
And this is across the board. This is not socioeconomic in any
Oh, no,
area, right?
across
This
the
can
board.
hit wealthy people. This can hit lower income.
Yeah.
This can hit anybody, any minority, hit anybody.
Anybody across the
Yes.
board.
Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning that, Kellee, because people really need to understand. I mean, I have a doctor who's in Beverly Hills right now who was Dr. Mom, getting ready to sign on with NBC to be Dr. Mom 90210. They took her 4 kids. I mean, she's Harvard grad. They have her 4 children. I mean, you know, it isn't, there's one attorney that says it's the black, the brown, the yellow, and the down. And I say,
Yeah.
no, it's not. It's anybody, everybody. There's no discrimination with this entity, with the agency. There's no more. It used to be, you know, there was more of a target, more of a prevalence in certain communities where child abuse may have been more active for a variety of reasons. They don't, that's not happening anymore.
Well, and they're not trained. You know, I mean, so many times I would get so upset. Many times, you know, the workers that work during the day, because they have such large quotas, they have to hit the families. You know, you have
Right.
to see the families, I think, in 24 hours or 72 hours or something. And so they'll call and announce their visit,
Which
you
is,
know, which is the stupidest thing ever. I used to fight against it so much. How could you? Because I had so many cases where I would go,
Right.
somebody would call it and it was after hours, and so I would go. And to be honest, when I saw it was an open case, I thought, oh, okay, whatever, it's going to be okay.
right.
And I had to take the kids because 2 kids were starving. You know, they handed me It was two kids, a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. The dad hands me the 1-year-old. She weighs no more than 10 pounds.
Oh, my
You know, I
gosh.
went like this, and she's just staring at me like this with big, big eyes.
Sullen,
The
yeah.
4-year-old pops out of from sleeping under a table or something, and all she says is, "I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay," and had the most distended stomach that was so hard. And I didn't go with the police because I thought it's an open case. You know, it's probably nothing. You know, a disgruntled neighbor or something
Right.
like that. And the father was very big, and so I said, you know, it's no big deal. Don't worry about it. The social worker will take care of it in the morning. Don't worry. And I left. I went straight to the police station. And I said, no questions asked. Come with me because we're taking these kids. They were being
Absolutely.
starved to death. But the daytime social worker always announced her visits. And so the kids were, you know, the baby couldn't speak. And
They were clothed, probably layers on
Yeah,
them,
exactly,
and happy, and I'm
exactly.
okay, I'm okay.
Exactly. And I had the mother prepare a bottle for the baby. I will never forget this sound for as long as I live. For the baby, for a bottle, the moment we gave it to the baby went, I mean, and just you know, drank it down. I mean, it was, and then I you know, you don't usually in you know, in the emergency response go, you know, talk to the people afterwards.
Right.
But I checked with the foster mom, and the baby had started to gain weight. You know,
Oh,
I mean,
thank God.
So you do have
Those cases are real. Those cases need to be addressed.
Yeah,
Thank God you were
absolutely.
there.
absolutely.
You know, and there are good social workers that handle those cases. Listen, those cases get resolved.
Yeah.
We won't hear about those cases because they get resolved.
Right. Well, exactly, and that's the issue.
What
And
percentage is it that do not get resolved?
You know,
Or maybe it's the other way around. What percent does get resolved?
I couldn't really answer
wonder.
that. It's a good question. It would really take some real numbers being put together, and real numbers, not
Right.
Yeah.
you know, the secondary
right,
books.
Exactly. Sorry,
God.
not fake numbers. Exactly.
Not fake numbers.
exactly.
It's really hard to
And
tell.
It's so, you know, and then I think we were talking about before we left, you know, you don't send a male to interview a 6-year-old little girl with sexual abuse.
That's right.
You don't interview them in front of the parents. How many
Right.
times where the kids say, "Does your mommy hurt you?" And mom is standing right there.
Right.
You don't
Glaring
interview
at them.
Yeah. You don't interview them in the same bedroom because maybe that's where the abuse happened.
Right.
You know, you sit on the floor so you're not this imposing figure for a little kid. You sit on the
Right.
floor with them. I mean, there's so many different things that we can
They don't do any of that.
and there's just the training. It lacks so much training. I got in trouble for asking. I used to always ask questions about all types of abuse. If it was a neglect case, I would ask 2 questions about physical abuse, 2 questions about sexual abuse, just to make sure.
Yes.
Well, this kid, it was a physical abuse case. I asked the sexual abuse case, and sure enough, the kid was being molested by his father. I would have never found that out, and I got in trouble for asking questions outside of what was called in. I said, I don't care, and I
Yes.
continued to do it.
Good for you.
Yeah, I mean,
Ah,
it's
I
just.
wish you were still there.
Oh, I got to
I
tell
really
you,
do.
it holds
I bet.
such a
I
special
bet.
place in my heart. I love it. I mean, once I got licensed, I left, and you know,
Of
became a
course.
psychologist. But I loved the work. I really did. It was hard.
It's
but it
hard,
was
but it's so
satisfying.
rewarding.
Yeah.
This is our future. If
Yeah.
these children continue, I can't stress it enough, while everybody's kind of turning their faces, you know, we're going to be in trouble. Society is going to be in trouble.
bet.
And I always bring up elder abuse, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Why is elder abuse so prevalent right now? Does anybody think about that? I mean, without proof, naturally, this is my opinion. My theory is the children that were abused, that were ignored, that
Are
disclosed,
angry.
they're angry. And
angry.
what are they doing?
Yeah.
It's typical that somebody who was abused goes into some type of a help
Profession.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And what happens then? That vicarious trauma comes in, and then they start reliving, and then they become mean. And you see all of these, you know, 20s, 30s, 40s, taking care of these elderly people, and horrific things happening. I mean, rape.
Yeah.
I mean,
know.
all sorts of stuff going on. I can't help but think, why is it that this child protection issue is so prevalent now, and the elder abuse issue? Is there a correlation?
I think so. I think you're absolutely right. It
I
would
mean-
be interesting to see if there are any studies, or if you know, that there should
Well,
be a
there
study
isn't
on
any
that.
because I've been looking, but
You've researched it?
yeah, I'm putting it out there for people to at least say, let's just take a closer look.
That would be great for a dissertation
That's
for
just
someone getting their
Absolutely.
PhD, you know, to look at if there's a correlation between the two. And I bet you there is.
I'm sure that there is. I just my
People aren't born bad. They're
no,
just
they're
not.
No, they're not.
You know, I don't believe that. I mean, I don't know what you would say from a spiritual standpoint, but I don't believe
Well,
it.
I think that there's some real low functional souls that come back, and we come here to learn. We come here to grow, for our souls to grow. And I think what happens is you've got these kind of low people that have had, say, very few lives and kind of almost newer here, and they come back and they have, had abuse, or they've been the abuser, and then they come back as sometimes they come back as having to have the experience of having the abuse. Sometimes
Right.
it's one way. Sometimes they just keep coming back in that same place of abuse. And so somebody has to go in and to break that cycle, which is the work that you're doing.
Right.
It's
And we
really
must
important
break
to
the
break
cycle.
it.
Yeah.
You know, you ladies said something early at the beginning of the show. You said it's amazing. There's so much advocacy for animals. And there is. I mean, even the money as far as donation is so disproportionate when it comes to donations for child abuse and donations for animal abuse. 105 million animals, 5 million children,
Wow.
right? Per year. So we're talking
That's
real
amazing.
disproportionate numbers. But,
Yeah.
you know, one day I'm thinking about it and I'm just, because it always gets me. We're talking about human beings. And before I worked with children, I worked with animals. That was my thing.
Yeah.
I was volunteering to save the abused animals, you know. So
Yeah.
it's no doubt that I've come and that's my calling.
Yeah.
Well, it's one thing to rescue an animal, and I certainly have done that, and I'm a huge
Yes,
animal advocate.
me
huge.
too.
It's another thing to rescue a human being.
So what do you think? When I start to think about why are these numbers disproportionate, because we do have good people that live here that would be more than happy. And I think I have it, ladies.
What do you think?
Think about Sarah McLachlan, is that her name? The singer,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You look at that commercial, right?
Right.
I mean, who doesn't have their eyes
Oh, my
well up
gosh.
when you see that? I mean, even the way you just said, right, like your shoulders, it's like, oh my gosh, that cuts you to the heart. But what are you seeing? You are seeing the bruised and abused animals.
Yeah.
You see their injuries. We don't see that with children. We
No.
just hear about it.
Right.
If we saw, what about who was the Sally Struthers, who did the hunger?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did she do? They took the cameras out and they showed the children.
Yeah.
Donate once a month to Little Sally, and Little Sally would be looking up.
Right. Yeah.
Once again, it was a success. With this, rape children, what do you show?
That's true. You don't.
You don't. So out of sight.
Is out of mind.
And what are
Out
the
of mind.
laws for that, too? I mean, are you allowed to even, you can tell the story maybe, but are you even allowed to show pictures?
You should be, because it's real and it's growing. And what will it take for a society to say they are just as important as that little cat, as that dog?
Yeah.
course.
But you're right. We're visual.
We're visual.
We're visual, and if we're not seeing it, then
Right.
and we don't,
It doesn't penetrate us the same way.
No, it doesn't.
And
It
and
doesn't.
many people don't believe it because it becomes he said, she said.
Well, and it becomes something that, again, is so kind of out of what you want to think, that our society is. That
we are not
kind of
we're not
push it out
monsters.
or rationalize it away.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
To consider that would be to consider that we live amongst monsters, and
Yeah.
Which is a horrifying
it's
idea.
horrifying.
But it's true.
It's frightening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially if you're, and you've worked so hard. But look at Jerry Sandusky, pillar in the community,
Right.
So right.
Ah,
starting the nonprofit to do what? Help children.
right. Exactly. That's
And really
just-
started at the core of the innocent.
That's
well, and
it's
that's
easy.
but I think that's the epitome. He's the poster boy
Yes.
for a pedophile.
Yes.
In the sense where he was working with kids from a charity standpoint. I mean, he's the epitome of the poster boy
That's right.
for a
Well,
pedophile.
and priests.
Yeah, priests, come on.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, when we think about pedophiles who try to work in an area where, where they have
Weasel
access
their way
to kids.
in.
Exactly.
Weasel
and
their way
he's,
in.
he's
Yeah, that's a good.
high profile. He's, football, which, we think is just so incredibly wonderful in this
Yes.
country, and especially a coach, we hold him on very high regards.
Penn State.
Let's
add
exactly,
Penn State
exactly.
to that recipe.
So, there's just no way, the likelihood of probably thinking that he was going to get caught was
And people walked in
minimal
and
to nothing.
saw him
And they didn't do
sodomizing a
anything.
10-year-old
I know.
and turned around and walked out and went, oh, that's the coach. We can't go there.
Right,
Or
exactly.
went and told and they said, keep your mouth shut, we'll take care of it. Wow. And nobody took care of it. And they adopted how many children? And I am sorry, but I have no respect for his wife.
None.
And I think she was very much a part of it. Because don't tell me that a wife lives with a man. A woman lives with a man as his wife and doesn't know 6 children? 6 children and you don't know that he's raping them?
Unbelievable.
Come on.
Unbelievable.
It's
Now,
ridiculous.
he's still in jail, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
For
God.
life.
Thank God.
Wow.
He wouldn't
Wow.
want to be on the outside. There's
So-
some pissed off people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it gets, and part of it, if we can't show visuals, part of it we should put it out in the media, just like
Yes.
that was, because that's what happened. When you hear about it so much, then people get angry, and you're absolutely right. If he was left out in the community, somebody would have done something. So that could be
Absolutely.
another way to get it
Yes.
out there, is to put it out there so much.
Speaking of somebody doing something, this father who lost his child, I had him on last week, Jewish man. His kids get taken away, a boy and a girl. He's forced to move out of his home, and he goes through a series of changes that are just unbelievable that the department is making him do simply because he's a Middle Eastern man. He raises his voice, and they say, you're a DV guy, domestic violence,
Yeah.
Although he's never put his hands on anybody, and that's not what he was doing. And he was kind of cocky about, wait a minute, I'm in the United States. I mean, that's what we all think, right? This
Right.
land of the freedom, and we have rights and our civil rights, and you cannot infiltrate those and violate those. And lo and behold, they take his kids, and he buried his child after they put his child in this home in Compton. 5 years old, they buried him. And I just thought, my gosh, when we think about how far they will go, and it's unbelievable because the foster mother left this child at the hospital, 108.5 fever.
Wow.
Left him there to go into a coma. And I'm trying to think of why I was bringing this up. You said something, and I've lost my.
It was about putting it out there, putting the information out there. If we can't put the faces out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this father absolutely refuses to let this go.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh.
There's as a matter of fact, we just found out, he called me last night, there's a police record that the social workers submitted that he had never seen. But the case is closed now, naturally, because his son is buried. And his other son, a day after my show, his daughter, a day after my show, was permanently placed outside of his home. Wow. Permanently
And this is how
placed.
many years later?
This just happened Monday.
No. How many years were the kids away from him before they got permanently placed?
A year and a half. A year.
Was
About a
there
year.
a mother?
That's no
around?
time for reunification either.
Oh, gosh. Listen, this was a nightmare. They knew that they screwed up.
Oh,
They never gave. Actually, this father, I shouldn't say they never gave. He did 90 hours of parenting classes. He said, what more can I do?
Wow.
And it was never enough. Oh, the reason I was bringing this up is because they inserted in this police record that they alleged was father's. The father had a DUI, that he used crystal methamphetamine. Well, father has his police record. None of that exists, which means what? Somebody fraudulently put that as a means.
that's just sick.
Well, Dr. Susan's case, the Beverly Hills doctor,
Yeah.
in her file at the appellate level, she was a convicted robber.
Felon?
Armed robber.
Wow.
But lo and behold, it was somebody else's name, but they didn't look at that. Wow. But same amount of kids and same court hearing date, so it looked like her. So the justices at the appellate level
That
said,
is
we're not going to give these kids back to
unbelievable.
an armed robber. She's bad.
That is unbelievable. So what kind of work do you do? Like if someone is going through this, do they reach out to you? Do they find you? Tell us a little bit about
So
what
they
you do.
can email help@nationalsafechild.com.
Okay.
Okay, anybody that needs help, it's help@nationalsafechild.com.
Okay.
We provide legal resources. I'm a paralegal,
Mm-hmm.
and work with several attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
We are filing our first federal lawsuit against the department right now.
Really?
Yes, yeah, because I can't encourage it enough. I mean, if we recognize that it's a financially incentivized program, then where do we have to hit them?
Exactly.
Below the belt.
In
And
the
I'm not
pocketbook.
talking,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
in the pockets.
Wow.
Go to their pockets, because that will put a halt. It'll put a spoke in that. It'll take the spokes out of the wheel or put a wedge
Right.
in the wheel, because we need to
Yeah.
stop it, and it's through the money.
Wow.
So we go to court with parents. We have ADA workers for American Disabilities Act. They have rights. Disabled parents, they are abused in ways that you couldn't imagine. They're never even told that they have special rights when they go into these courtrooms. They're never told that they can have help or advocates from the ADA for free. And so they're doubly abused, and then they're labeled with these handicaps that they were born with. So what if you're born with a handicap? Does it stop you from being able to parent your child or pose a safety risk? Because if it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's the way it goes. We come in all different colors and sizes and dull and sharp, but we're all still in the same box of crayons.
Hard to fathom, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
Yeah. So we do everything from A to Z.
Wow.
We really do.
What a wonderful resource for people out there.
Yeah.
So tell us again, the email is?
help@nationalsafechild.com.
Okay,
One word.
wonderful. And you have
Yeah.
a wonderful show here as well.
Yes.
Sundays at 7 p.m.
Sundays at 7 p.m.
on Channel 2
on Channel 2.
called,
National Safe Child Show.
yeah, how wonderful.
Wow. Well, keep your vibration up. I'll say that. Keep your vibration
I
up. Call
will.
in Archangel Michael. Keep your vibration way up.
Okay, I
You do
shall.
incredible work out there.
I'm so grateful for you ladies.
Yeah.
I'm so
You do
grateful
great.
that you are interested in this
Oh.
and that you are advocating from this from a different side. You know, not everybody has to be in the mix and in the muck of it like I am.
Trenches, yeah.
Yeah, in the trenches, but they can do something.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you ladies are
And
doing.
I
you know.
think opening up minds and awareness
Yeah.
is one of the most important
Yes.
things, as you said.
Really
Yes.
opened my
we can
mind
do.
up.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And get them in the pocketbook.
Yes,
Yeah.
and get them in the pocketbook.
And like you said, it's not that there aren't great social workers out there and that,
That's right.
it's supposed to be for, to help kids, but it's so broken that
Yes.
that's what needs to be looked at and put out there so that can be fixed, to force them to fix all the brokenness about
That's
it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. At this point, I really don't think it can be repaired. I think it's too far broken. I think there's too many bad players. I think it's become such a comfort zone. I think that the child trafficking in the United States, I know this for a fact, makes more money than the illegal drug trade and arms trade combined. Selling children has become the greatest commodity. It's
that's
hidden.
awful. That's awful.
Nobody has to know about it. They hide it under the guise of confidentiality. And it's time for people like us to really come out.
Well, then there needs to make a change, either
Yeah.
a change in the laws, a change in the system. I mean, something needs to change because
Yes.
it can't. This is
Can't go on like
no,
this.
it can't.
Our country won't last like this, I'll tell
No.
you.
And then we're surprised when tragedies like Oregon and Sandy Hook and stuff happens, and we take a look at the one person who did that.
Right.
We don't look at that it's a, that it's telling us there's a lot of things wrong and we need to fix it.
Exactly.
Because those kids that were traumatized grow up.
That's right.
Yeah,
And
that,
they
and
will be
trauma-
marrying
Yeah.
our children.
Exactly.
And they will be in our neighborhoods, running our country, perhaps.
Right, exactly. And what I always say, age doesn't erase trauma.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I've met more people who have come out when they're in their 40s. I've met people even traveling cross country. I mean, we magnetize what we magnetize. I'm
Right.
sure I'm preaching to the choir. But I mean, I met a woman who said, 46 years old, she said, You're the first person I'm telling this to.
Yeah.
Yep, abused. I mean, people don't talk about it.
Yeah.
So
Thank you for
ladies.
coming on our show and
Thank
talking
you.
about
Very
it.
much.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate
Thank you
it.
so much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate both of you.
We appreciate you.
Yeah, we sure do. We sure do. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
The views and opinions expressed in these radio programs are those of the individual hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of Universal Broadcasting Network.
Shows that make you laugh. Shows that make you think. Music that moves you. It could only be one place. Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
You've been listening to Both Sides Now, featuring the unconventional duo Dr. Shirley and Kellee White. Two perspectives, one world.